So meeting is being recorded. You're welcome to turn your video off if you would like, but I just want to thank everyone who is able to tune in, who's able to get creative with us. I think it'll be a really, really fun night. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of what I have on my very tiny little countertop. So obviously we've got the focaccia. It's been spread out for the most part throughout the entire baking pan. This is a 9 by 13 baking pan, which I think works the best, but you can make any size work for sure. And then I have some bell peppers in both orange and red. We have some fresh herbs that are whole. And then I have some chopped herbs and some shallots. So lots of different opportunities. I do have some seeds so that we can get some crunch. I do have a little teacup of lemon juice, which, like I said on my email, I think is really helpful to keeping the herbs crispy and keeping their green texture as they bake and also as you decorate. So if you have it, great. If not, no worries. And then I use a finishing salt that's called Maldon, but really any kind of salt will work: sea salt, kosher salt, pink Himalayan salt. The first thing that you're going to want to do with your dough is sort of pinch the corners, maybe every inch or so, just to give a little dimple. This will give a little bit of texture, so it'll be a place for the olive oil to stay and for whatever you're decorating with will also stick. And you can see that it falls down pretty quickly because it is a really goopy dough, so it's not a big deal. You don't need to make big amounts, but having the dimples, I think, just helps everything stay together really well. And if you didn't want to decorate, if you were just making focaccia for fun, you'd probably try and be a little bit more intentional with your dimples, because that's what would kind of keep all the herbs in and the salt and the olive oil that we're going to sprinkle on at the very end. I should mention that I've washed my hands before, as I'm sure all of you have as well. You can see there's like a little bit of dough on my hands, so I'm just going to turn around my sink and wash it off. You certainly don't have to, but I think it makes it easier to grab everything. So the way that I am trying to decorate this, like I said, is with the rotunda in the middle. So the best way for me, I think, is to kind of divide this into thirds, because the dome will be on top, and then you'll have the middle third, and then the columns. And then hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit of an allusion to stairs in here. I will mention that I tried basing this off of a picture of the rotunda earlier, and it did not go well, so I am instead basing it off of the university logo of the rotunda, which is much more geometric, much better suited to decorating. But you can freeform this, you could do abstract shapes, you can do all sorts of flowers. And when Gilly and I made this, one of us had like a very beautiful sunflower in the middle that you can make with bell peppers and maybe some seeds or herbs or things like that. I think herbs make for great stems of flowers, and I think bell peppers make for the great petals of flowers. I think shallots are really fun as bushes or clouds. So like I said, you can totally get creative, take it abstract, however way you wish. So now is when we dive in, which is the scary part a little bit. But this is going to be the base of the dome for me. So the way that I'm trying to decorate this is that the dome will be in red, and then the middle section will be in orange, and the pillars will be in orange, and then the sides will be in red, and probably the stairs will be in red as well. So I think color contrast is helpful when you're trying to create shapes, to make it a little more clear about where everything begins and ends. And when you put your herbs in, or your bell peppers or whatever, just give it a little bit of a pat so that it gets covered by the dough. You don't want to sink it in too much. As you can tell, this is a slightly haphazard dome, but hopefully it'll still work. And then I've got the little triangle, which represents the front portion of the rotunda, which is also where the clock would be. And I should say that I'm assuming that most of y'all have seen the rotunda at some point in your lives, but if you haven't, it's beautiful, as all the UVA grads know. You know, we do have a couple parents on the call who I'm sure would hopefully agree with that sentiment. This is the part where feel free to break things up, squish different things together and whatnot. What is everyone using to decorate? Does anyone have preferences? Are you more into the herbs or more into the vegetables? Feel free to turn your mic off and share if you want. Alrighty, so this is kind of the top half of my rotunda, and now I'm going to transition and start trying to do the pillars. And the tricky part of this is that I'm going to try and find bell peppers that are all about the same length, or just break them so that they are around the same length. And the rotunda itself, I believe, has 6 columns of pillars, but University logo only uses 5 because I guess it works better geometrically. So I am following their guidelines and only using 5 pillars. I'm a little bit longer then. And because this dough is so malleable, it is pretty easy to put things, accidentally put something in the wrong spot. Maybe let's try and find a clean one for the last pillar. You might have limited supplies and just be finding whatever is the right one. I see something in the chat. Herbs. Oh, fantastic. I love using herbs. I must admit that I think the vegetables are really great for making designs and whatnot, but I do think the herbs taste the best for sure. Definitely my favorite. So this is sort of alluding to the side of the rotunda, which I'm then going to do on the opposite edge as well. And then in the university's logo, they have a little square here and a rectangle here and a little square here. So I'm going to try and imitate that, which I believe is a reference to the sort of little walkway around the rotunda above the stairs, but it was a bit abstract, so I can't guarantee that. So now we're just going to come down, or I am at least, kind of close off the rotunda stairs. My bell pepper might be just too short, which is why I'll take one of these little pieces that I've been sort of saving. Close that up there. So hopefully this somewhat resembles a rotunda to those of you who are familiar with it. It is definitely a loose interpretation, but I think that's part of the fun with these gardens is that it can kind of be whatever you want it to be, whatever you say it should be. I think the most impressive thing about it is just that you put in the time and the effort and the creativity into making something like this. So I would say for sure the first time I was making a focaccia garden, I was definitely unsure about what the end result would be like, but it was very fun to experiment with. So I may look into filling in the dome since I have so many extra bell peppers. And something that's nice too is because this dough rises pretty fast, as it rises, it will kind of come around whatever you're decorating with. So it'll hold it all in place pretty nicely when you bake, which means that when you go to take a bite of it after it's been cooked, it won't just fall apart on you, which is, of course, never fun. And if anybody needs me to slow down or wants any clarifying questions, or if you're just watching and you're not decorating, but you have questions about dough or anything like that, feel free to interrupt me at any time. All right, I would say this rotunda is essentially complete. So now this is where you should do a little bit more of the experimenting. So once you have whatever you want the centerpiece to be, question in the chat, can you buy, pre-made finished focaccia bread and just decorate it on top? That is a good question. I would say it probably needs to be raw because baking the decorations into the focaccia is what makes it stick, what makes it hold. And if you were to just place them on top of pre-baked focaccia, they would probably fall off. So you're definitely welcome to experiment with it, but it may fall apart on you a little bit more. So like I said, I have these herbs, which for me is going to be chives, thyme, and dill. All of these have been washed and dried, obviously. And then this is some chopped dill and some shallots. So in terms of what I like to do, I think that thyme and chives are really good for establishing boundaries, whether that's making a stem or if you want a dividing line between what's sort of your ground and then your sky or something like that. In this case, I'm probably going to use these herbs to outline where the kind of lawn back or foreground would be, and then I'll probably use the shallots as some clouds. And then for me, the sesame seeds or whatever seeds you have on hand are probably just going to be a little bit of decoration as opposed to an essential part of the design. So I'm going to start with the clouds, I think, just because those seem simpler to me. And these are shallots that I just sliced thinly, but you can use all sorts of vegetables. You could use a full, red onion, or I've seen people who use purple potatoes for items in their gardens that they want to have a little bit more of a defined shape. It's going to be a slightly cloudy day on the lawn, I think. Maybe I'll try. Something to keep in mind too is that your dough is going to rise at very different rates depending on the season. So if it's winter, or if you keep your house cold, if you have central AC, which I do not because I live in Lower Manhattan, it's probably going to take you about an hour for the dough to rise to fill the whole pan. But in a warm place, which is sort of what I'm in right now, it really only took me about 20 to 30 minutes in order to get everything into the corners. So this is the part where I'm just going to take herbs, and I'm going to take the lemon juice that I have, and I'm just going to lightly coat them in the lemon juice. You could use lemon water, which would work just as well, but I didn't feel like adding water. And I'm just going to start creating a dividing line for the grass. Something that I've learned too as I make these is that some bites, in my opinion, are going to be yummier than others, depending on what kind of flavors you prefer. So obviously you're going to get very heavy bell pepper here and not a lot of the herbs, but if you're down here, it'll be the exact opposite. I'm hoping that I can sneak these guys in and make them fit. Can everybody hear all right too? If you ever need me to adjust the volume, feel free to let me know in the chat or by unmuting yourself. I'm just going to come in with some thyme just to give a little bit of texture and taste variation. I will say one thing about thyme is, so it's one of my favorite herbs. I love the taste of thyme, but you do end up with these stems in them, which when you bake them are still going to be pretty strong. They're not really something that I think you'd want to eat. So just be aware you might want to, the thyme is going to give the dough itself really good flavor, but you might not want to eat the entire stem of the thyme, so you may want to pick that off as you prepare to eat it. Then I'm going to layer in some dill next. Other herbs like basil or mint would work really well also. I think one of the tricks is to just keep in mind whether you want a fresher, kind of more leafy herb like dill or like chives, or if you want something that is a little bit stronger like rosemary or thyme. Those are definitely going to give you very different textures and of course different flavors too. So just continuing to come in with different herbs. And each time I just dunk them in the lemon juice a little bit, bring them around. I might test out some of the chopped herbs as well. Looks like there's a question. Get those dill chunks off my fingers. Can you show the focaccia design you are creating? Oh, interesting, Diane. I have the design pinned. So if you're on an iPad, sometimes the pin doesn't show up. So let me try spotlighting the video instead and see if that works. It's one of the conundrums with Zoom. Does that work better, Diane? Are you able to see? Oh, and thanks for your help in the chat, y'all. Let me know if that's not working for some reason, and I'm happy to do some additional tech support and see if we can rearrange things so everyone can see. And I'm moving a little bit quickly this time compared to the first time I did it, so if it's taking you slow and steady, don't worry at all. I would say that is very, very normal. I pre-planned this design in my head, but normally I would just kind of go freehand. Oh, and because I'm using lemon juice, I accidentally got a seed in there. Not the kind of seed that I want. We'd clearly recommend doing this near your sink, which in my kitchen is a given, but is not the case for everyone, I'm sure. So since I've done quite a bit of dill and a lot of chive, I'm going to go back and bring the thyme in again just to give the dough a really nice flavor. And I'm going to put it on the end because, like I said, I tend to prefer to pick the thyme off right before I eat it so I don't get the stem caught in my teeth or anything like that. So having it on the end makes it very easy to do that. Piece of thyme might not want to break for me. There we go. So I tend to like to use the larger herbs for the main kind of design of whatever the grass or the lawn or anything like that, and then I will go back and use the chopped herbs to fill in some of the gaps a little bit. If anybody has suggestions for ways to improve this design, I am very open to collaboration for sure. And focaccia is a form of flatbread, so your dough doesn't need to be very high up. You can kind of see in this video, it's a pretty shallow baking dish, but I've also baked it in much thicker dishes, and it works just as well there. So it really is about personal preference. If it's in a thicker dish, just extend the baking time a little bit. Just keep an eye on it, I would say. And I choose not to preheat my oven while I'm decorating. A, because I don't want my kitchen to get too hot. B, because I want to save energy. But C, because I think if you give your dough a little bit of extra time to rise while all of the herbs and vegetables and whatnot are in the dough, that really helps the dough cling to whatever it is that you're decorating with. So I think the amount of time it takes to preheat an oven is the perfect amount of time for everything to get wrapped around. And we have some questions in the chat. A list of the best colored veggies. That is a great point. I would say that just based on personal experience alone, I think that bell peppers tend to be best for the red and the orange. I would say that a green bell pepper is maybe not as well suited, because if you're going to use green, I think I tend to prefer herbs because there's more variation in the greens in them. I don't know what to use for blue, which is a great thing to look into. I will try and do that. And if you're interested in purple at all, I would say shallots are a good light purple, but there are these little purple, I think, potatoes that you could probably find at your local grocery store that I've seen people use. I've never used them personally, so I don't know how they bake. Something to keep in mind too is that this is only going to be in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, which if you're using a potato, it means you're going to want to slice it very, very thinly, so you cook the potato all the way through so you don't get that raw potato taste. If you're using tomatoes, which are also good for red or even kind of an orange if you're getting cherry tomatoes and things like that, my recommendation would be to slice them in advance and then cushion them in between some paper towels, because that will soak up a lot of the liquid. If you have too much liquid, it's not going to cook as well. It's going to lose a lot of its shape. So if you want it to maintain its shape and stay crisp, I would definitely recommend drying them out a little bit before, and also adding salt. So if you salt the tomato and then use a paper towel, that'll soak out a ton of the moisture. And are there any veggies that don't work well? Anything too wet, too big, or too small? I sort of half unintentionally answered your question. I think, Maggie, I would say, yeah, tomatoes can be a little bit tough to work with if you don't dry them out. Anything really juicy like that, I tend to make savory focaccia. You could probably make a sweeter version because it is a pretty mild dough. It's just flour, yeast, and olive oil and water. So if you wanted to make something a little bit sweeter, you could probably use apples, but those do have a bit of moisture in them, so you might want to dry those out a little bit. If you're making something sweet, I would say something that's almost pure water, like an orange wouldn't be well suited. Cucumbers probably wouldn't be either because their water content is a little bit too high. So I would say go with your gut, but too high of a water content is probably not recommended. And something that's too dry could burn, but I haven't had any issues so far with herbs or things like that burning. And especially when you cook it, if you make sure to put it in the oven on a lower rack, it's less likely that all of your herbs and your kind of more delicate foods on the top will burn. I don't think there's anything that's too small that you couldn't use. But again, just keep in mind, just watch your eye for anything burning a little bit. Probably gonna shove some more chives in because that is one of my favorite flavors. And if I had been really creative, I maybe could have found a way to make a little dog or a little picnic blanket on the lawn since that's a common sight, but I'm sticking with the more simple option this time around. Sprinkle in some more dill. I have quite a few shallot slices left over, so I might make another small cloud just for fun. There'll be some grass in the cloud, it looks like. Sign I should wash my hands again. Alrighty, so I would say this is mostly done. If you want to continue decorating, if you have more pieces of your garden that you'd like to build, please continue to experiment, continue decorating. Whenever you feel like you have the main part of your design done, the next step I would say is to sprinkle with anything you want to add texture. So for me, I'm probably going to add a little bit of sesame seeds, but these are black sesame seeds, by the way, but I'm going to do it in this part, in the lawn part, because I don't want to have little black pieces in my sky. I feel like that'll look a little bit like flies maybe, which is never what we want. And I can already kind of tell that because these seeds are on the top, it's going to be harder for them to stick as I or my roommates or whomever eats these pieces. So just bear that in mind, that some pieces are going to be a little bit messier than others depending on what you're using in each section. Let's sprinkle those out. And then next is because a huge part of the flavor in focaccia comes from the olive oil. So if you remember, we coated the dough in olive oil as we were letting it rise. We coated this baking pan in olive oil. And I would also say to drizzle the top in olive oil is always a good bet, especially if you're not using as many decorations. If you have something that is a little bit more sparse or a little bit more minimalistic, definitely use the olive oil because so much of the flavor that your bread will have will be from the olive oil as opposed to maybe some of the vegetables that you're using. So I'm just going to gently drizzle it in olive oil. Try not to get it on my counter. And then the last very, very essential step is salt. Salt is obviously a huge part of what gives the dough its flavor. Like I said, I use this salt called Maldon. I don't have the box on me, but it comes in a little kind of grayish white box, and it has a little triangle on the front. I'm happy to include it in a follow-up email, but it looks like this, so it looks really flaky. It's just it's a brand of finishing salt, basically. But I say any kind of finishing salt. One of the things that I love about it is that not only does it give the dough a really yummy texture, but it has its own kind of crunch. So something like table salt or kosher salt or Himalayan salt, sea salt, oftentimes they don't have that crunch because they're ground so finely, and you don't want something that's coarse, because if you're using coarse sea salt, then I feel like it's just a little bit too much to chew into. I mean, if you like that really crunchy flavor, would definitely recommend coarse salt, but for me, flaky finishing salt is the perfect balance between a nice little bit of crunch that's still manageable. What is my favorite olive oil? That is a great question. I am ashamed to admit that I am not a connoisseur of olive oils, so my favorite is whatever Trader Joe's sells. They have many, many options. I tend to prefer kind of more Mediterranean blends because I feel like you get a lot of really nice different flavors from those olives, but Italian olive oil, Greek olive oil, I mean, any of it is delicious. And if any of you on the call have a recommended olive oil brand, please feel free to share in the chat. So it looks like this corner still needs some love when it comes to salt. I think it's pretty hard to over salt when you're using a finishing salt because it is a more mild salt. Oh, and here's this is kind of fun. This is a really good example of when it's in a larger crystal. This is kind of the shape. So it almost looks like a square pyramid. And then usually in processing and shipping and whatnot, it gets broken up into the smaller pieces that you see throughout. But that's kind of what it would look like when it was first created. All right, so this is off camera, but I do have honestly quite a bit of additional decorations. So this is one of those recipes where you could be making a second dough, perhaps, depending on how many people are in your household. Fortunately, everything that I use to decorate is stuff that I use in my kitchen pretty regularly, so these I'll probably just make a nice little dip and have them with dinner. The herbs, if you have leftover herbs, I recommend turning them into an herb oil. It's really easy, it's pretty foolproof. If you just have a food processor, you basically just throw in all of your extra herbs, throw in a little bit of lemon juice, which will probably have some left over anyway, and some olive oil. And if you blend all of that together, it comes out looking a little bit like a pesto might, but doesn't have any dairy in case you have you're lactose intolerant, or if you're vegan or anything like that. And it goes great on kind of everything. I've put it in omelets, and I think it's really delicious. I'll put it sometimes on top of white beans that have been cooked in like a vegetable stock or a chicken stock. Or you can put it on toast, you can put it on pasta. We've made it with shallots before, or not shallots, scallops before, so you can use scallops in the herb oil. So if you have extras, there's lots of stuff to do with those extras. So, you know, don't throw them out, would be my recommendation. So hopefully you all have a pretty good view of what my little rotunda looks like. I want to make sure that anyone who has questions has a chance to ask them. A picture of the final product. Yes, I absolutely will send you a picture of the final product after it's cooked. I can try and share my screen actually. So this for reference was the image that I was looking at, the Rotunda logo. So you can kind of see that this was my dome, and then I have the little top of the rotunda, the columns, the little base. And then if I go back, this is the picture of the rotunda for those of you who haven't seen it, although I would assume most on the call have. And then this is the focaccia gardens that Gillian and I made together. So I don't have hers on the screen because I didn't have a copy of it on hand, but we did something similar over Zoom where we just took a bunch of ingredients and kind of chatted away as we decorated our gardens. But you can see the left is before it went into the oven, the right is after it went into the oven. The lighter bell peppers did get a little bit crispier for sure. At this time, I was actually living in an apartment that didn't have a working oven, so I had to make that in a convection toaster oven. So like I said, this bread is one of the most flexible breads I've ever known because you can make it in a toaster oven, which is huge. But you'll see that some of the vegetables and herbs will lose a little bit of their color. The chives I didn't put in olive oil, and the thyme or in lemon juice, and the thyme I did, and I think the thyme retained its green a little bit better, which is one of the reasons why I sort of swear by this lemon juice trick now. And because your bread is going to get sort of golden, some of your lighter bell peppers or other vegetables or whatnot might blend in a little bit more to your background, which is one of the reasons why I think it's fun to do a before picture and an after picture so you can see your focaccia in all of its different forms. And then if I go all the way back, this was the example that we used in our banner. I did not make this. This was for sure pulled off of the internet by someone with a much better camera and probably better baking skills than I do. But you can see there's all sorts of different ways to make flowers. You can make more abstract gardens, more kind of intentionally designed gardens, whatever your heart desires. Okay, let's do full screen again. And I think this one is still being spotlighted. Can everyone see the decoration still, the focaccia? Fantastic. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing their screen or turning their camera on and maybe showing everyone else what they've designed? I know the dough's a little slippery, so you might not want to lift it up, but maybe you can position your camera if anyone's comfortable. And if not,
I can.
Yay!
So my dough didn't spread as nicely as Amelia's did, and this is a laptop, so I'll try and flip it, but can you see?
It looks beautiful, Ariana.
I tried to make some flowers.
That's beautiful.
Ariana, that looks beautiful. What are you talking about?
I hope that the bread spreads more in the oven.
It looks great.
Okay, I don't know how to share screen on the computer.
Okay.
Otherwise, I do it. But I took a picture, so I'm going to try and see if I can forward it to myself and then upload it to the computer.
Okay, fantastic. And if you'd like, maybe like Ariana did, you could try and turn your laptop around or whatever is easiest for you. Does anybody in the meantime want to also show their garden? Oh, I see Denise's. Denise's looks beautiful.
What, ma'am? Say hi. Hi, Amelia. This was so much fun.
I am so glad. So for reference for everyone on the call, Denise has known me since I was 3 months old. So she's been in my life a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, your second mama.
Exactly. Yours looks beautiful. I love it. I love
Thank
the
you.
olives too. I never thought to do olives.
Okay.
You have Kim's video spotlighted right now.
That's pretty.
That is gorgeous. See, and Kim has a really deep pan, which is nice because it'll give her a lot of space for the dough to rise.
Oh, that's
nice,
smart.
crispy, crunchy
Didn't think of that.
crust as well. So, like I said,
That's
either a shallow one or a thick one will work really well. That looks great. And I love that you also did the clouds, Kim.
Thank you.
That is nice.
Like I said, anybody who isn't able to share their screen right now, or anybody who wants to wait and finish theirs off camera or anything like that, I would love it so much if you all email me pictures of your focaccia gardens, whatever they look like. And if you're comfortable, I would love to also highlight them on our social media. So I would be happy to take a picture of them and put them in an album that we'll have going if you are comfortable with that. And if you're not, we can just save it internally for the little group that was here so we can all see everyone's gardens. But everyone has been so beautiful. I'm so impressed with your creativity, with your willingness to go on this journey with me. I know it sounds a little crazy in the beginning, but I want to give everyone one last chance to ask any questions you have, whether that's through the chat or if you want to take yourself off mute. But otherwise, I'm probably going to start preheating my oven and bake this little guy. I promise to take lots of before and after pictures, and we can all compare and see how they evolved as they rose. There we go. Oh my gosh, it looks like succulents. I love that. That is fantastic. So see, there's a ton of different ways to get creative. You can use a lot more herbs or a lot more bell peppers, really depending on whatever your preference is. So many options, which I love. And I think some of y'all have the recipe on hand, some of you don't, but for those of you who don't have the recipe on hand, I'm gonna let y'all know that I believe, I'll double check it, but I wanna say it's at 450, I think, for 20 minutes, but I'm gonna pull open my New York Times Cooking really fast just to double check that that is actually true.
Amelia, it's true.
It is true. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Gillian. She knows. So yeah, go ahead, preheat your ovens. These will continue to rise a little bit as they preheat. Stick them in, let them bake away. You're gonna get a really nice, crispy, crunchy crust, and it'll soak up all of the flavor of all the herbs that you've used or the vegetables or anything like that. So if anyone has final thoughts, last call, feel free to share them. I'm so grateful that we could do this together. I've been wanting to do this event for a very long time. I just think it's so much fun to be able to get in the kitchen with people who are, you know, creative and engaged, and this was a blast. I had a really, really lovely time.
Thank you very much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
did you
so
send
much.
your
That's great.
email address so we can send the photos?
Yeah, I'll send you an email after the event. I'll include some before and after pictures either tonight or tomorrow morning, and then you
Terrific.
can be right back with all of your beautiful pictures.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And if any, I mean, it looks like a couple iPads might be on mute, but if anybody who's on an iPad wants to unmute themselves and ask questions as well, feel free. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night, y'all. It was so fun decorating with you, and I will also send you a copy of this video in case you want to go back and look at any of the beautiful, beautiful examples that we created together tonight. Have a great night, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.